Hello and welcome. This is Puneeth Suraana and you are listening to Galata. With me today I have Bijoy Ramachandran. He is an architect, a filmmaker and the co-founder of Hundredhands. In this conversation, we travel all the way back to his childhood in Dubai, where Thursday evenings meant a surprise movie tickets being waved by his father. Weekends meant filling up a sketchbook with his brother of Asterix and Mad Magazine sketches. We also deep dive into his early exposure to beautiful works, whether it was the temples in Kerala, where narrow lanes led you from the noise of the city to spaces of quiet reflections, or the in-between spaces and the magic of it at IIM Bangalore. We also explored what it means to build institutions, the sheer struggle and stewardship that projects like the Bangalore International Center takes, the pain and perseverance it requires to navigate committees, but most of all, the joy of seeing public spaces that you build become a living and breathing organism. We also discussed his collaboration with his brother Prem, where both of them made this movie with the legendary B.V. Doshi, and what it means to learn not so much about architecture but humanity from a master. This episode is a tapestry of vivid stories, design metaphors, and philosophy, from liminal spaces to waiting stations for the soul. Bijoy candidly weaves through all of this and what it means to have his craft, his clients, and most of all, why architecture is less about materials and more about meaning. Without further ado, please enjoy this conversation that I had with Bijoy Ramachandran. Bijoy, welcome on the Galata podcast.
Thank you, Puneeth, for inviting me.
This is the first in this season, and I'm shooting it at my home. It's very special, means a lot to me that you've come down here. My usual first question has always been, and I think will remain, is what were the conversations around the dinner table when you were growing up?
That's another lifetime ago. It's a long time back. I grew up in Dubai mostly. My parents, my dad and my mom worked in the Middle East. And what were dinner conversations? I mean, my dad particularly was really a big film buff, and so films were a big part of our conversations. Just films, Malayalam, English, whatever. I mean, my dad was really keen on film. Then discussions about home, because both of them, every summer we would come back to India, and so there would always be conversations about their childhood in India, in school, memories of living in Bombay or in Kerala. These, I mean, like any family, I mean, memories of things past and film, I guess. Yeah.
What kind of films did you watch up growing up?
Well, mostly commercial films. My dad was a big Hollywood movie buff as well. I mean, he was a big Western fan. He loved all of the old Westerns, McKenna's Gold and The Magnificent Seven, old classic Hollywood movies. But we were also, every Thursday, I remember my dad would book tickets we had a very fancy theatre in Dubai in those days, which would show Malayalam films. And it was almost every Thursday, but it would be like this big surprise that he would come. We would see him coming from the office in the car, and he would have the tickets. He would be waving the tickets for the film for that evening, and we'd all be so excited. I mean, this is at a time when, access to films, unlike now, where you can probably watch anything, anytime. Those days, we had one film showing on the TV once a week on Channel 33. There would be a Hindi film. And going to the theatres was a big was a big deal. I mean, that this was a real celebration because it was so, it wasn't accessible as it is now.
What is the first or early memory of you getting into the creative field? Was it at college? Was it at school? Where did you start getting in touch with the... Because I love how my best friend Abhishek looks up to your drawings and your ability with just the pen and paper.
Well, drawing has been a big part of our lives, both my brother and I. I mean, right from childhood, we used to have sketchbooks, we used to draw, and mostly, I mean, I used to copy and draw. I would copy from comics like Mad Magazine or, some, superhero comics or Asterix and Obelix. I mean, I would always try to draw those characters to get a sense of muscle or, posture or, my brother, on the other hand, would draw from instinct. I mean, he didn't copy as much as me. He was more creative in that sense. But drawing was a big part of our summer vacations. I mean, in those days when we didn't have, the internet and all of that, we were either on the street playing with friends, or I remember afternoons, everybody would be asleep at home and my brother and I would be drawing in the living room or something, just filling up our sketchbooks. So yeah, drawing has been a huge part of our upbringing. I mean, both for my brother and I. But also, I mean, I always say, this story about, I was in boarding school in Montfort in Yercaud, and we would come to Trivandrum for our summer vacations where my grandfather lived. And from Trivandrum, I would fly to the Middle East to be with my parents in Dubai. And when we landed when we got to Trivandrum, my grandfather almost every single time would take us out to Kovalam. And in Kovalam, there's this amazing hotel that Charles Courier designed, the Ashok Hotel, which is now, I think, the Leela. And I don't know, I mean, this memory stays with me always because that building is incredible. You get into the building kind of into a cave, and then you make your way out to the pool where, my grandfather would rent, or he would pay a small fee and we would be able to use the pool even though we didn't stay in the hotel. And that whole passage from the reception, which was this kind of dark, embedded room, out to this place of prospect where the pool was, up at an elevation looking out onto the horizon, that just, I mean, it's a memory, it's an ancient memory, a memory from childhood of this passage through a building that you really remember as quite a powerful way in which to encounter the horizon, coming from darkness out onto this incredible platform to light. So that, I don't know, I always feel that may have in some sense, subliminally impacted me and pointed me in this direction. That's a great building, the Courier building in Kovalam, and sitting on that precipice, on the edge of that cliff, looking out onto the Arabian Ocean, onto the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, it's like if you eat great food, you will be able to make great food.
Right.
You need to know what is really good
right.
spaces like.
Yeah. Yes.
What other place did you have like that you cherish so much? You had such a vivid memory of this.
Well, and then not so much in the Middle East, but every summer we would come back to India, and it was almost always the case that we would do this kind of temple darshan, that we would travel to all of these. And Kerala has these amazing temples which are in these large compounds with buildings in the compounds, and each building has its own shape and size and form. And that you would traverse on this stone pathway linking these buildings in a campus that had particular, geometric relationships. These buildings were all aligned in a certain way, and there were this hierarchy of open space that you came into a very large yard and then made your passage into smaller and smaller yards till you were in the sanctum, which was absolutely just one person intimate in that engagement with the deity. So those temples also, they stay with you, especially the Kerala temples, which are really sort of, in a way, discreet and they don't really pronounce themselves in the context. You enter through a wall, through a very discreet gate, and you're in this kind of village of buildings. And the discovery is something that seems very personal rather than a communal, like the big, temples in Tamil Nadu, which are, have a certain presence in the city. Though those temples also have this idea of a sequence to the discovery of the self, that you're moving from the grand scale of the community to the sanctum where for a moment you're in intimate communion with some kind of energy, at the heart of the temple, like in Sri Rangam or something. So the Kerala temples are also like that they bring you to this moment of absolute intimacy. It's so those temples too, the Kerala temples, I'm sure you've seen, they just have a quality of interiority which is difficult to match. Some of those buildings are just, they bring you to a place of sublime quality. From sort of banal, from the city that is banal, you move into places of more and more sort of, profound quality.
Yeah, in a way, temples were like the public places of...
Yes, yeah. Yeah, all public functions used to happen in the temples. When I was growing up, anything that the family did, we would go to the temple. So if there was some kind of ceremony to be had, then we would participate in the temple.
A place can make you feel a certain way based on the flow of it, the design of it.
Yes. We don't talk about architecture much like that anymore. Our conversations about architecture tend to be, right now, of course, rightfully so, it's completely oriented towards the idea of sustainability, that how careful can you be in the selection of materials so that things are, carefully used and efficiently used. But I think in that conversation, we lose out on this equally important conversation about meaning and metaphor, that buildings also carry those qualities. And when you go to an old building, many of those buildings convey these things in such strong ways that they move you, and you don't really know what's happening, like when Peter Zumthor had come here, we took him to Nandi, and Zumthor is 80, but he's like a child, and so he was dancing around and posing next to the columns like the carvings, and being very mischievous all over.
When you say Nandi, you mean Nandi Hill?
Nandi, to the temple, to Boganandishwara temple.
Okay.
This big temple that's at the base of the hill range. And so we're walking through the temple. He's frolicking, etc., and making jokes and things. And then we come to this one part of the temple where there's a big tank, and there are these steps, and it's quite an incredible construct, as a piece of architecture. And the moment you cross that threshold, and you could see that with Zumthor as well, that you suddenly encounter something that has a presence, and Zumthor talks about that, this idea of presence, that he's seeking this in the work, that you come to a place and it somehow kindles an ancient memory, maybe our shared memory as people, of digging for water, or I don't know what it is. But suddenly everything stops, and things slow down, and then he sat there for like half an hour, he was a different person. And it's not just him. I think all of us, when we encounter architecture of profound quality, it moves us in ways to, either slow down or to be yourself or to be completely comfortable and in tune with, the environment. Very few modern buildings do that, that they move you in that kind of fundamental way. The only building that I really enjoy and like a lot that does that for me is the Management Institute here, which Doshi did.
I Am Bangalore.
Yeah, I Am Bangalore. That there are places in that building that have profound quality, that really move you, and they heighten your senses, to light and to just being alive. It's quite something. Yeah, and you can't talk about many buildings like that. Yeah.
I remember a beautiful quote, and I thought I would have end with this, but I can't believe I'm starting with this.
There are lots of notes.
So this is, a part of it is a transcript from a series of interviews that Bijoy did in his, I think, formative years as an architect. And I think it's an absolute gold. It's 82 minutes long. You don't have to buy the movie, but the transcript is freely available. I'll link it down in the show description. It's worth the 2 hours. I have devoured it twice already. And I like what Sanjay Mohe said about happy place, and it's so poetic. As an architect, you're looking at it as a totality. You're not looking at a facade, or you're not looking at a functional thing. You don't just stop at resolving functional aspects. You try to look at how the light comes in, how the air flows through, how do you harvest water, how do you make use of earth, nature, how can the building breathe by itself, and eventually it has to satisfy the aspirations of the client. It has to look at technology, it has to respond to climate. So there are several things which you look at from several different points of view at the same time and try to create a happy place.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's from a very long time back. But I mean, Mohe's work is all about that. This idea of, you know, a place that really heightens your senses, that gives you joy to be alive and to be able to experience a fully embodied sort of space. Yeah, I think there are a few buildings. I mean, and it is primarily because our conversations aren't about that. There's a wonderful building in Sikandra. You know, you've probably heard this before. Yeah, Sikandra is where Akbar is interred. You know, his body is in this mausoleum in Sikandra, which is, I think, half an hour out of Agra. And I mean, imagine the ask from the client to build a mausoleum. You know, like the client's coming to you and saying, build me a mausoleum, a tomb, where I can wait in the most pleasurable garden till Gabriel comes to take me and relieve me of this, you know, purgatory. So it's basically a waiting station, the mausoleum. You know, the soul is in a way imagined to be waiting there till there is nirvana, till there is, you know, relief. And so Akbar's waiting in this amazing building in the heart of this incredible garden. It's a breeze palace, you know, it's got a wonderful pavilion-like quality. But at the heart of this building is this chamber that, as you make your way through that, you know, through a series of gateways, all brilliantly embellished with jewels and, you know, gold foil and all the riches, and you come through gate after gate till you come to this tunnel that brings you into the core of this building. And it's a core that has almost no light. There's no embellishment at all. It's just a white room with 2 shafts of light, bringing light down onto the sarcophagus, onto the place where the building is interred. I mean, the person is interred, and you can't believe the power of that sequence. That in making all of the manifest things, you know, the physical reality of the world manifest through all of this articulation and embellishment, to come to this room that is completely absent of anything, in a place where you can't even see very clearly because the light is so harsh, so low, that for a minute it feels like you've transitioned into some other realm, that you're in this kind of in-between place where Akbar is in that room waiting for an eternity before he has relief, you know. And it gives profound meaning to the idea of the mausoleum, this idea of a waiting station. I mean, who talks about architecture like that, you know, about these kinds of things, of pauses, of time, of sensation. I mean, we're all caught up in talking about what material we used, what glass we used, you know, these kind of really...
The logistics.
Yeah, the logistics, the technicalities of putting things together, whereas these profound metaphors seem difficult to even engage with a client about, you know, what is your aspiration, not in terms of how much money will you make, but what is your aspiration really, you know, in terms of just making places for people. So that, I think Sikandra is an incredible example of this, which is visceral, that you get a sense. I took my kids there when they were very young, and you can sense this, just like Zumthor in the temple, that this threshold brings you an awareness of something that isn't immediately apparent in the real world, that there is some energy there which feels like you're encountering something unusual, that there is this other realm that exists, which architecture through its maneuvers has revealed to you. And so, yeah, that's, I mean, how often do you get that, you know? Yeah.
What other metaphors define your work? Because I know we're talking about the philosophy of design in your work, and not the specifics of it.
Right.
Though there are many projects I'd love to talk about later. But what other metaphors do you have like these?
But I don't have a stock book of metaphors. Oftentimes, I think the metaphor comes when you engage with the project deeply. We've been fortunate to have a fair number of institutional projects, and almost all of them are predicated on this idea of the liminal space, so the space in between program which allows for chance encounter, for people to meet. I mean, you went to IRA, to Neve. IISc is also predicated on this really rich quality of in between. So the program is the program, and typically when you get a program document from a client, they list out all of the things they need. And then they will put 30% of circulation or something as just to make the calculation, And in fact, for institutions, circulation is to move the place that you need to move around from one room to the next. A corridor, for instance, is part of circulation. For us, that 30% is actually the heart of the project in an institutional building. That really, like Khan says, the plan is a society of rooms. That these rooms where the program is like classroom, laboratory, staff room, whatever. These rooms are defined. The client knows very specifically that I need 600 square foot classroom, I need a 1200 square foot laboratory. So all those things they've really cracked in their mind, because that's the requirement from some governing body. And then they'll add all of that, and then they'll say, okay, here's 100 square feet of stuff that I need, and then 30 square feet is whatever circulation that I need between all of these rooms. So for us, that in-between space, between the classrooms, between the laboratory, as the kid is coming from the classroom going out to, let's say he's going to the lab or something like that, that he meets his friend, there's a place to just bunk for a bit, be a bit late to lab, I don't know, whatever. That it's in that, and then you suddenly, when you meet him, you'll say, did you see what happened in the class? I mean, what were they talking about? And in those casual discussions, actually real learning happens, that you encounter a friend, you're trying to figure out what, something that you're not sure about, or you're talking about other things. I mean, we, for instance, at BMS, when we were studying at BMS, so much of our learning came sitting outside the college in front of SLV. There was a idli shop outside the college, and we would just be there after class every day, and we would just be sitting there and just casually talking to each other. So many things, so many realizations happen, or we make plans. Let's go to, Nandi Hills, or let's go to Yadgir, or wherever, just let's go and let's figure out this climatology stuff, we'll drive out. That in that exchange is what, that leads to a kind of profound understanding. So that metaphor, so these metaphors for schools and institutions, I like that idea of the liminal space. Again, IIM Bangalore is a great example of that, of the quality of liminal space really becoming profound. Sabha, for instance, the restoration building, really there the metaphor is rejuvenation. The way that this building, in fact, through the original materials of this building, so much of it has been reused to make the building new. And so at the heart of this is a building that you can't really tell what exactly the architect did, because it seems just like a cleanup, but actually all of its regeneration has come from within itself. And so it's a fantastic, for us, this idea that the hand of man is somehow hidden, and the building seems to have been there for 100 years, and it will last now another 100 years. We've just helped it a little bit on its way, that it has inbuilt in it the strength to just continue. Sabha has been amazing that way. How little can you do? How much restraint do you have to show in a project like that? So each project, I think, brings with it its own what Khan used to call nature. What is the nature of the thing? And you have to answer. You have to ask this question as you're working on it. Like, what is this about? What is the school about? What is conservation job about? What is a wedding venue or a kalyan mandap about? What are these buildings at the core of their existence? What is it about?
Yeah, I think most of us are so lost in the logistics of the technicalities of it. We forget what is something about, what is it meant for.
Right. Yes.
Like actually, what is it meant for? Sure, it's meant for a wedding or education, but It's nice. You make rebels like us. You give place for us. I'm so thankful. I've gotten kicked out of classes so many times. Now I know there's somebody who's intentionally designed places where students can linger.
For the outstanding ones. Yeah. Right.
We had to find a kopcha or a corner where we could just wait and spend time.
Right.
But the first time I realized about an in-between space, which I didn't know, but I got benefited out of, was Christ University has this main road at the heart of it.
Yes.
And there are buildings across on either side of them. But that main road was really where most of my amazing moments happened, because I would bump into friends.
Yes.
And being out of class so much and being so social meant that I had friends across departments and I would meet them all the time.
Yes.
And I would joke sometimes saying it takes me 30 minutes to go from one gate to another because I meet so many people. Right. But that is where I got to know that ideas spark.
Yeah.
You meet friends. And most of the time it's just banal. You're talking about what's happening, who's going where, what's the scene, who's dating whom also sometimes. But most of it was banal. But there's these moments of insights that would come out, which wouldn't happen in those isolated classrooms.
Yes. Yes. No, for sure. My brother went to Christ as well, and he has very fond memories of that main spine. Because a lot of bands are formed on that spine. You meet people. You're looking for a drummer, and there's the drummer on the spine, on that spine. Yeah.
That's what I love about your work. That you have put in a lot of details and thought to things, which is usually not deliberated upon.
No, but I mean the credit is not ours alone. I mean, for instance, if you take the BIC,
Bangalore International Center.
Bangalore International Center. This is a project that took a very long time to come to fruition. It took 7 years to do. Of course,
I like what Mathura said yesterday on a call. Mathura is one of his teammates. She said at the end of the call, architecture is a slow rewarding profession.
Right.
Yeah,
it is. No, but to answer your question about the deliberate quality of the work, it comes also from being involved in something for the time that it needs. So for the BIC, while we were in the project, it was really very difficult. I mean, we were struggling to sort of figure out how this is working out for us, because it was a very long, time duration for a very small building. But in hindsight, when I think of it, this engagement with the building committee at the BIC with Ramachandran and his team, that we really looked at it in great depth. What size of auditorium should be there, what size of seminar rooms, what kind of seating should we have, where should, what kind of facilities do we need to accommodate. So everything there, I mean, it's been 2019 it opened. So over the past 6 years, that it's really not much has changed. They've been able to use it in ways that we haven't imagined because of all of the inbuilt robustness of that building. And it doesn't come from us. It comes from this real engagement with the client and the architect, that both are we've both focused on on what we want to deliver, and both of us are working without real ego. We're just in the interest of the project. So in hindsight, when I look at the BIC, I think it's been the most rewarding learning experience for me in the true benefits of collaborative work, of really being engaged in work where everybody is together trying to make something worthwhile.
Can you double click on the challenge or the struggle that it took so long? Because it's a very small project.
Yeah.
It's not a bigger project at all.
So we won the competition in 2012. It was an open international competition. There were around, I think, 85 entries or something, of which around 10 of them were from outside of India. And it was fortuitous that it was a Bangalore-based company that won, and so everybody was very happy because that made things a lot simpler. Mr. Mohe was on the jury along with, I think, Aparna Narasimhan, and I think even Mr. Jayasim was on the jury. I was just, I think, around 38 or 39 at that point, and it was a big thing. For a small practice to get a public building in the city, And the BIC is a very respected institution. I mean, they are all the city's intelligentsia are part of the membership, and they have really important events, really the best events in the city. So we were thrilled to win. And so we worked on it for, I think, a year and a half or so, and then we had come to some kind of...
For the competition?
For the actual building. So after having been appointed, after we won, we worked on it for a year and a half, fixing the competition proposal so that it had all of the things that the building committee wanted, and was now fleshed out to make a real building, to build. And then when we went for sanctioning, we realized that the site that we had been given in the competition was different in proportion to the site that was actually theirs. And so this was like an existential, crisis, that is there a project anymore on this site? Because it was a lot narrower than what we had.
Oh, it was much narrower?
Yeah, it was narrower than the competition scheme. And so the building that we had designed for the competition, it didn't work on that site. And so I remember this meeting at the office, there was this silence in the room after I had made this admission that, we've got the wrong site for the competition, and there is this mismatch, and I can't put this building on the new site and have to rework the project. And then Ravichandra said, give us a week, we'll have to think about it, how to move forward. And I thought, it's over. I mean, this is the end of this honeymoon, the project is gone. And then after a week's deliberation, the building committee came back and said, we're going to go forward. And so whatever you can do with this new site, let's rethink the strategy. And so the project basically looks nothing like the competition. It's a new building, almost everything about it is different from the competition scheme. Many of my friends, they like to irritate me by saying, oh, if only you had built the competition scheme, the new one's not very good, The competition scheme had so much more flair and was such an impressive thing. But nonetheless, I think this whole exercise of negotiating with circumstance is a very valuable lesson for an architect. That the architect, like you're talking about, this idea about deliberate action, the architect brings the essential skill of the architect. Of course, one is to have the great ideas, but also to be a very careful listener. That he or she is assimilating all of the information that is coming, all of the circumstance that is being presented, and trying to come to a reasonable outcome by putting all of these things together. That's the essential skill. And so this upset at PIC, we had to figure out a way forward to make something worthwhile in spite of these conditions. I think we've done reasonably well, but it has come as a result of a lot of people working together to make something worthwhile.
I would love to know more. What were the other challenges? What was other more?
So the change of site was the big challenge.
One, yeah.
The second was, the BIC is a membership. There are 1,000+ people in the BIC membership. Many of them are illustrious sort of people who've written the books on the subjects that So, for instance, we've had meetings with Mr. Girish Kannada at the office, where I remember he had come to the office and we'd just designed the auditorium, just made the first cut of the auditorium. And he came to the office with these 2 A4, sheets, Xerox copies of notes that he has made. And he had drawn every single auditorium where his plays had been staged in India. He had drawn the size of the stage, the size of the wings, how big the green rooms were. And so if he was going to make a new play, he knew exactly how to organize the staging of this play, if it was at NCPA, if it was at
like a floor plan of the entire.
Yeah, he had this sheet with dimensions marked. I mean, it was just outstanding. And so he came to the meeting and he knew everything. So he told us, I need a stage of at least this size. I need wings of a certain size, because if I have a certain kind of play where there are big costumes, I can't have narrow wings. I need, the green room to be a certain size, because typically there are multiple people getting ready in the green room, at least 4. So give me enough space for that. really insightful, detailed feedback, and so we have to incorporate that. And then in addition to him, of course, there's Anmol Velani was there, Arundhati Nag came to, I remember we had built, so all of this has happened, we've designed it, it's under construction, the stage has been made, and the raking is done in the auditorium. And Arundhati Nag's, the steps, where the seats are placed. Arundhati Nag comes in from the side, she comes in from the side door, and Ms. Nag looks at the auditorium and she shakes her head, completely disappointed. And we're all like, my God, after all this, now what, And she said, this stage is not big enough for me. If I have a dance performance or if I have a troupe, I need at least 30 feet in depth. You hardly have 20 feet. I need another 10 feet. And then she goes away. And then Ravi is the building committee, the chairman of the committee. And so we're back to the drawing board, figuring out how now to increase another 10 feet on the stage. We build a new, so if you see the BIC stage, it's got this big, projecting, what is it called? The thrust stage, it has this big projection. And we lost a whole row of seats to accommodate this deeper stage that she wanted. And so proportionately, this is a fantastic auditorium because the stage is almost as big as the raked portion of the auditorium. And it's so intimate. Yeah. If you're sitting even in the corners of that auditorium, you feel like you're really up close to the performer. The thing about the BIC is that the big challenge, apart from the site, is the challenge of incorporating these very valid and incredible feedback that we received from these illustrious peer advisors, peer reviewers, that they were telling us about their lived experience, and we were trying to figure out a way to make this building, in the image of that it accommodated these ambitions. It was really very difficult, but the benefits are to be seen, that the building has that quality because of the feedback that we got over the course of this project. But I think all credit for the BIC must go to Ravichandran. He managed all of this feedback. So early on, initially we used to have these presentations where we would present to the 1,000-strong membership, and some random comments would come up, right? That why can't you do some Indian motifs? Can you do, there would be some random feedback that somebody thought was a good idea, and he would stand up. And so I told Ravi early on that I won't be able to do the 1,000-strong committee presentations because I don't know how to answer these questions that I'm getting at these meetings. What can you do about it? And so Ravi took it on himself that he would be the in-between, between the membership and us, that he would filter the comments so that only the useful and important ones were coming to us, and he would communicate what our ambitions were to the membership. So he did that. He managed the building committee. There was a point in that building committee discussion where that whole brick wall was going to get cancelled. As you enter the BIC, there's a huge sweep of brick that is 2 stories tall. And there was all this concern about the maintenance of that brick and that it looks kind of, dodgy. It's not a very nice material. It ages. Can we just build it and paint it in red oxide? Someone had this bright idea. But he fought that battle for us. He had Jaisim support us, saying that, Mr. Jaisim said, of course it has to be in brick. And then everything was put to rest with that. So he fought our battles as a building committee chairman. And third and most importantly, he almost single-handedly raised all the money for that building. So, he needs all the credit that he can get. He needs to be recognized as the person who's responsible for that project. It's really, we were very, very fortunate to work with him on that and to have him on our side to get it done. Yeah. Money was a big issue, another issue to talk about. We were getting small donations, people would give 50,000 rupees or like 2 lakhs or there would be, a small amount of money to be spent. Once we had finished the building and come up to the final slab, Nandan Nilekani visited the site. So Mr. Nilekani came. I remember him very vividly, that day he was in short sleeves, wearing chappals, just walking in. We were standing inside the auditorium. I think it was the same day that Arundhati Nag basically shot down the auditorium, and we were all kind of in a funk. And Ravi said, Mr. Nilekani's come, I'm just going to take him around. And so he went out, and he was gone for all of maybe 15 minutes. They walked around, Ravi showed him around. And then Ravi came in and he was beaming. And I said, what happened, Ravi? And he said, we just got $1 million from the Nilekani Foundation. And suddenly it looked like we would finish the building, that we would have money to finish, that we would have chairs in the auditorium. And till that time it was it was going to be a long slog. And so money was a big issue as well.
Yeah, and Ravi is amazing. I didn't know this context, but I always knew that. And he's always been so approachable, so nice, so warm.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
A big shout out to you, Ravi. And I know he'll be watching this because I'll be sending you the link.
He's been on the show, I'm assuming.
No, not yet. Not yet. But he's facilitated a lot of the episodes in his own gentle way, whether it was making an introduction or pointing out to somebody that should be on the show.
Right.
And he always calls him Mr. Galata. I think he was like a steward, and I think every project has a steward. That sort of...
Yes.
Otherwise, 1,000 cooks will never make a meal.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I will get back to this idea of, because you've done so many public projects, and I'm sure every time you're meeting a committee, you're not meeting one single person who can call the shots in most cases. So I'll come back to this in a bit.
No, with regards to the BIC, I think this idea of stewardship is really an important thing that you brought up. I don't know if you want to talk about it later, but for instance, a good example of this is not a good example is the National War Memorial. This amazing building that Shomitra and Nisha designed in near the musical fountain, near the planetarium. It's a beautiful building. It's profoundly moving. But there's nobody to own it. There's nobody to take care of it, to be the stewards of making the exhibition, of making sure that it's a live, valid institution. With the BIC, we've been very fortunate. Because building the project is very easy. Building the facility is very easy, but to run it, to give it a life, and to make it a vibrant place for people. That's not easy. Someone with a real vision has to be able to do it, and it's been great. Of course, Ravi and Raghu have been fantastic. Vikram's been amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just we've been very fortunate. The city has been very fortunate to have this institution because of that inspired stewardship. Even if the building wasn't great, I'm sure that it would have been as vibrant and as happening as it is now. Just because in that small auditorium of ours, 4 Nobel laureates have spoken, which, it's just unbelievable. Yeah. So it's fantastic like that. So stewardship is the key. Making the building is the first step of its long life, that the building has to start its journey from that point when you hand over to the client.
So when we're building this house, my dad would always say, I am putting in the money. And I'd always tell him, yes, but there's only 25% of it. The 75% I will be putting for the next 40 years.
That's right. That's right. You're the steward. Yeah. Yes. That's right.
No, my dad doesn't watch the podcast, so I can chill. But you need those individuals that actually put in the life and sort of maximize or at least utilize the spaces that you have built.
Yeah.
And BIC and even Sabha are fantastic examples of that. Yeah.
Yeah, Sabha is also, just when Ravi is at the heart of that project as well.
Wow.
So I don't know if you know the history of Sabha. Sabha is an old school. It's a 150-year-old school. It belongs to the RBNMS Trust, which is a trust formed by this philanthropist who worked in the city during colonial times, Rai Bahadur, Arcot Narayan Swami Mudaliar, and he, a visionary person who made a lot of money, trading in fruits and spices and all of that. But then he had this amazing idea of creating these institutions for his community, Tamil schools for girls, or schools for boys, an orphanage, etc. So that he set up all of these institutions, and the trust can't really sell them or develop those sites. And so some of these buildings have had a second life. I mean, Cinnamon is a good example where it's also RBNMS property. RBNMS's own where the headquarters are. They're now refurbishing the beautiful auditorium that is in the back there. And then Sabha is another RBNMS property which Ravi has taken on a long lease and has paid for all of the renovations of these two buildings, and is now, it's become this incredibly successful public venue for events and performances. But again, I mean, in that project, really, we were the weak point in that project, in a sense that we had no background in conservation work. We had an amazing contractor, an amazing restorer, Nilesh Thakkar. We had amazing carpenters, Shaju and team from Kerala. We had an incredible client and this great ambition for a building and a set of fantastic colonial buildings. So everything is A++. And then here come the architects who have no background at all in this kind of work. And so when Ravi came to us, I said, that, we have never done conservation. Are you sure you want us to work on this? We went ahead, and thanks to his patronage and support, we were able to manage, doing this and this great team. We also asked Professor Vasavada from Ahmedabad to come at the beginning to guide us on how you document and what the protocols for conservation are. So, just using all of these crutches, standing on the shoulder of all of these giants, we were able to make something of it. But, I mean, it's all patronage and stewardship. I mean, someone has the vision for it, someone puts, the money behind it, and then someone is running it in a way that really celebrates that space. I mean, all of this is outside of the architect's control, So our role is very, very minuscule. I mean, so many things have to align for something valid to happen.
What are the things you decided not to do? I was told by Mohit, one of your team members, who I bugged for 3 hours. I did a longer episode with him than I'm doing with Bijoy. He's there till like 8. But he's like, we've done 4 houses in 20 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I'm curious, what have you said no to? What are those? What's like an absolute? Like there's a beautiful line in this transcript. You got to listen. This is all a sales pitch to go and read that transcript. Okay, it's worth it. Somebody I don't remember the architect's name, but because it's not my world, but he just said, when requests like those come, I tell them, you came in from a door. There's a way out of the door as well. Yeah. What are those projects like that for you?
Well, I don't think we summarily reject projects based on typology, but houses have been very difficult for us. We've also gotten kicked out of a few of the house projects that we've started. I think houses require a completely different mindset. There are 2 things that are kind of difficult in terms of houses. One is that the house, there is the issue of ego, that the house isn't really about the architect. The house is about the client. I mean, the client has come to you with a dream of, building this house in a certain way. And if you're coming in the way of that, if you're not seeing eye to eye with that vision, then this is a very tough marriage, between the client and the architect, because you're not really working towards the same goal. So that's one difficult aspect. The second is that more and more houses have become a way to show, your station in life. That I've arrived, I'm very wealthy, I'm trying to show others that this is what, this is who I am, and I have achieved whatever. And that's a difficult conversation to get into. Sometimes you do get into projects where people are purely doing it in a way to show, how much they've spent, and they are not comfortable using certain kinds of materials because of, the connotations that those materials have. So those conversations become very difficult to have. I mean, because we don't approach work like that, and so then, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You want to show, who you are, what you've achieved, etc. That's fine. But it's a tough conversation to have for us. So houses have been a little tricky. I remember the great Australian architect, I think Glenn Murcutt said that or was it Glenn Murcutt or was it Joe Noero? One of them said that you should never build a house that's more than, for a family of 4, you shouldn't build a house that's more than 1,500 square feet.
Oh yeah.
That should be your rule. That if anybody comes to you for a house more than that, then that's just immoral. But you can't. I mean, you're not the one to judge. So there are difficulties in how you navigate the world when you have such morality issues.
Yeah, but he's from Australia. So.
Yeah, that's right. No, so houses have been difficult. They're very intense. You're always engaged. The clients are demanding. They want a certain engagement, quality of engagement. Institutions are way more simpler to do.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
I thought it's the other way.
No, institutions are infinitely
easier
to do.
To do.
Yeah, because I mean, the involvement from the client is very minuscule. They're interested in what they need in terms of that program. As long as you satisfy that, and as long as you stick to the budget, by and large, you're free to investigate whatever you want to investigate. So this notion of metaphor, for instance, I mean, I'm able to do all of these things because institutions are easier as a typology, that you can embed in them all of these other meanings. And so almost every architect I know hopes to do more institutions because you can try to get somewhere a bit deeper than with a house. I don't know. I think that the houses are the only ones where we've had trouble, really. Trouble as in we've had fewer success. Our success rate is very low, yeah.
Thanks for your honesty.
Yeah, well, yeah, Mohit is right. I mean, we've done maybe 5 houses in 22 years, which is a very, very dismal record. Yeah.
Anything else you've said no to? Any materials, any practices, any approaches?
No, I can't remember. I can't think of anything. We were approached to do a big commercial development, and there was this. It was very, very aggressive in terms of the requirements, in terms of how many units they wanted to jam onto the site, in terms of the time frame, and so it was just very difficult for us to do it. So I mean, sometimes the decision is also because of maybe they want it really quickly, or it's difficult for us to accommodate, then we don't take on. I don't think, other than that, we've not really refused anything. Yeah. We don't get asked that much. I mean, the institutional projects we do get, but for houses, it's not very often that we get, people coming for houses to us. It's probably because of our track record. So, yeah.
What do you mean?
No, because we've built so few houses, so nobody really knows us as house people who do residential work. Yeah.
Why the name Hundredhands?
Well, because it is a collaborative practice. That it depends on many people to make something worthwhile. So Hundredhands just is notional of that large group, that it takes a village in a way to make buildings. That everybody's involvement is required, positive involvement. Yeah. So Hundredhands, my brother gave us that name. Prem gave us that name. Yeah.
It's amazing how you have collaborated with your brother. You're like, you did podcast before there was a iPod or a podcast
Right.
with B.V. Doshi sir, with all the architects. This is a beautiful blurred, again, the transcript. And this is the start of it. Like, I'll just read this and then I'll get back to this project of yours. Suddenly, architecture was out in the public domain. Lay people started commenting on design. They found, to their utter disbelief, that architects didn't drive Ferraris and holiday in Bora Bora. I don't know what Bora Bora is, but that planning efforts required designers, that architects did more than just elevations. That, truth be told, Vastu was the enemy. Yeah. And that though architects love to talk, as evident to anyone watching, this is the transcript, not me saying, okay. Almost all of us found communicating with our clients the toughest part of our job. I have 2 questions around this. One, you collaborated with Prem and got your idol B.V. Doshi sir on camera. What is that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, if we did nothing else with our time, these two films that we made, my brother and I made with Doshi, I think we will be forever remembered for it, and it will be the most worthwhile thing that we've done. I mean, just to have had that time with him. It also brought my brother and I closer together, that we were working on something. That's the first time that we did something together. And to have this time with him, not so much in terms of the architecture. Of course, the architecture we already knew and I had already learned. But to be with someone who is a kind of evolved, sophisticated person, someone who's wise and who has a certain humanity about themselves, about how you deal with other people, how you spend time. It was just, thank God we had the idea to do it. I mean, it just gave us a new way to approach things, My brother had a kind of medical, emergency after, and it was Doshi that guided us through all of that. So he's like that, the moment, and in the film there's this wonderful line his son-in-law says, that everything for Doshi revolves around the idea of family, that you may have met him just once, but now you are also part of this large community that he... So he will see you 3 years later and he'll ask you about your mum's, foot or, her diabetes, or, he would remember, he listens, he's got the time for everybody and he remembers things. I remember we had gone to Swati Snacks for lunch and this guy came and stood in front of Doshi, this older person, and he just stood in front of Doshi and said, Pranam, and he said, do you remember? And Doshi looked at him and this is, maybe 30, 40 years after he'd done that project. And he said, Madhya Pradesh Electricity Board, you were the supervisor. He remembered, he made that connection. This guy was completely floored that, Doshi remembered. And it's, of course, it may be just that genetically he's endowed with this amazing memory, but he also takes the effort to listen. So if you've told him something, my son plays soccer or football, he will remember to ask you, how is his football going? Is he still doing it? And he's meeting 15,000 people every day, and he has the time. So and that comes from a deep sort of humanity, that he's really, he really cares and is listening to you. So that was a fantastic, the movies, they were a great time in our lives, both my brother and I. We made them in a span of 10 years. We did one in 2009, which we premiered in Ahmedabad. We also had a big showing here in Lido. And then we did one in 2019 after Doshi had won his Pritzker. And that's a lot more sort of introspective, a lot more thoughtful interview where he talks about the end of days, about death and about, a transition to another stage of life. It was very, very moving. Yeah, that was, I think, the best thing that we ever did. And of course, my brother is just, he would be good at anything he decided to take up. Just an incredibly gifted person. So on those films, I was just the fly on the wall, seeing both of these people operate at this incredible level, and resonate with each other. It was a deep time of learning for me. Yeah.
Tell me more.
What else? The second film, I remember, we had shot everything, and a lot of the second film is shot just with Prem and Doshi. I wasn't able to make some of the shoots. And I think those conversations just between the two of them, they have profound quality. They go into things that if I was there, maybe it would have limited that conversation. I think it was great that it was just Prem and Doshi talking about life and about these kinds of transitions, and then Prem came back he lives in Tiruvannamalai. Prem came back to Tiruvannamalai, and sitting in that small room of his in Tiruvannamalai in a fever stretch of 10 hours, he edited the whole thing, just a bolt of inspiration, and it was all done with music and everything. Boom. And then he calls me and he says, "It's done, come." And so I go, and then 2 days we spent together just going through the whole thing. And yeah, I think what I tell a lot of young students is that you have to, so architecture, like, Wittgenstein says that the pursuit of architecture is actually like probably any other creative pursuit, is actually a way to discover yourself. That in the hope, you're doing this work in the hope that you find who you are, in terms of your prejudices, your preferences, your predilections, that you're trying to figure out, what is this spirit, and so when you encounter someone like Doshi or someone, you find this person who has come to be who he is, who has evolved into that kind of singularity, that they're completely at peace with the world. They've figured out that engagement, and that's the struggle. All of us are trying to get there, to this point where there's that wonderful essay, by I think Malcolm Gladwell, about Picasso and I think it's Monet, these two artists. And he said Picasso, when he was 12, already knew who he was, He had already figured out what his gift was. Whereas for some of us, it takes a lot longer, that you're 60 years old, like Monet, and then the light gets turned on, So as a creative person, you're just in that pursuit to find out who you are. Yeah.
I like your working desk at the office. You have this poster of B.V. Doshi sir, Louis Khan, and some of their works. And it didn't take me more than a moment to realize, okay, I think this is where Bijoy must be sitting in.
Yeah, when Doshi had come to the office, he saw in the conference room there are these three
yeah,
large posters,
Yeah.
There's Mies and Cobb and Wright. And Doshi says, "How do you work in this office? Because you look at these posters and everything is already done. All ideas are already here."
Oh gosh.
Yeah, stimulus is very important for me. I mean, that the office environment, and that's why the office is like that. It's fully cluttered. It's got a lot of stuff, and so you can grab onto things. There are handrails everywhere, so that you can latch onto something and hopefully move forward. So lots of books, lots of posters. That it's just a live environment. It's nice that it's very relaxed. There's long pauses and
I remember the first time I knew this place worked was when we had set it up. Abhishek and I were sitting here and we were just chatting for an hour. And it suddenly hit me, wait, we're just sitting here and chatting for an hour.
Yeah, it's very comfortable.
And Abhishek mentioned, I actually like sitting here and chilling more than the ground floor hall.
For sure.
The first floor hall. I was like, okay, I think I've arrived. This place is set now.
Yeah, it's very comfortable.
Thank you. And I'm glad that I finally have a space like this for the podcast. I wanted to understand about a few technicalities. One being the how. When I spoke about your work, one of the first questions that budding architects had was, I don't know how he gets the projects, and they'll be overwhelmed. Like you can see it. They're like, okay, I can get a house project, I can get a small commercial space, but public places overwhelms them off the bat. And you've been doing that for 22 years. So how if there's a young, let's say, 31-year-old Abhishek watching this, how do you advise him to find projects or opportunities like this?
One answer is, that's not a very hopeful answer, but I would say that we have been very lucky. We started our career with institutional work. When we came back from the US, a
When you
client.
say you mean
My
Sunitha
wife,
and
my
you?
Sunitha
Okay.
and I, when we came back from the US, we got our first job was with a client who we'd worked with in the US. They were at that point building a very large orphanage in Trichy with some donors' money. It was a non-profit organization based in New Jersey. And once I came back to India, the whole project had collapsed. It didn't go anywhere, this 500 children orphanage. And then out of the blue, we just come back, I think in June or something, and sometime in October or November, Mark Templer, who was the India CEO of that organization, called us and said that, there's an orphanage we want to build in Trichy. It's much smaller than the one that you worked on in the US. Would you be interested? And I was like, my God, it's fantastic. I mean, how small is it? It's fine. And he said, no, we only have an acre of land. And, and I was like, wow, I've got, this is amazing. Of course, we didn't get much fees on it, but it was a great start for the practice. Two things about it. One is, of course, that it's institutional, and so, it's just a public institution is fantastic to do. But the second more important thing about it is that there was almost no money to build it. So it was on a very, very tight budget. They could spend only 1.5 crores on the building, and they had to build around 35,000 square feet. So it's barely 500 rupees a square foot, to build it. And so this, I think, as a start of a career, to be forced to confront this idea of efficiency, of making sure that you're not spending more than you need to, and still get something that is worthwhile as architecture. That was a fantastic lesson for us. I mean, we worked with an amazing contractor in Trichy, one Mr. Manimaran, who's no more. He, again, just as we've been fortuitous in all of our other projects, I mean, he just pointed us in the direction, you've got only so much money. Here are some of the things that you can try. We can try a lot of vaulted roofs so that we can reduce the amount of steel. There's great clay in Trichy, in Tanjore and Trichy, because it's on the Kaveri belt. And so with the bricks that you can just get table molded bricks, and you can do vaults and reduce the amount of steel. And steel is really the killer in terms of cost. And so, I mean, to start work like that meant that, we were very prudent about cost, and we still are in terms of what we can do for projects. So that's the first answer, the answer that one is lucky, that sometimes, you get lucky and you get some projects which then propel you to do other institutions. The BIC competition we were lucky to win, and that then gave us Sabha, and now we're working on another project in Malleshwaram, which is also public. We're doing the Parsi temple renovation. We're doing, Archshila in Cochin. These have all come as a result of the BIC. I think the BIC is the start of this journey, in terms of public institutions. So that's again fortuitous. It isn't something that we planned. But I think the second answer to your question is that this traditional mode where the architect sits in the office and the projects come, I think that is changing.
Yeah.
And there are great examples of practices. Sensing Local is one of them. Here in Bangalore, there's Compartment S4, there's Matter in Goa. These are practices that aren't set up on this benign engagement with the city, that I will wait and patronage will come. That they're out there trying to figure out ways in which they can activate projects through community engagement.
Tell me more.
So Sensing Local basically has done a lot of work in Malleshwaram. One of their projects is in Malleshwaram, where they've worked with Suchitra and team. And what they've done is they've worked with the community. So they will try to figure out a project that the community may require. So in Malleshwaram, for instance, there are lots of these what are called conservancy lanes. They're basically the service lanes before we had universal plumbing and sewerage. That there are these conservancy lanes where all of the sewage would come and it would be then cleaned out and taken away. Those are all now paved, and they're open spaces which nobody owns, but they're in the public realm. And so Sensing Local and Suchitra with her Malleshwaram Rising team, they created a project out of reimagining these conservancy lanes. It's public work, They once they had an idea for it, they sought CSR money to do it. So which means that the architect isn't in the traditional mode, just aloof. They're out there working with community, finding the money, finding the project, defining the project with the community.
They're behaving like entrepreneurs.
Like an entrepreneur, exactly. And so I think that we are not doing any of that. I mean, we are not very good at that. And it may be something that we need to learn how to do. But there are examples for a young practice, for instance, who's just starting off to really look around their neighborhoods to see how they may be able to get engaged with their RWAs, with their communities, to find ways to fix problems that are all around us in our cities.
And there may be corruption, there may be a lot of bad factors, but you have people who can handle them as well. You're just one more in your list of items of problems to handle. They're not the deal breakers.
Yeah, and I would say the third answer is to just enter competitions as much as you can. As a young practitioner, a lot of practices don't do that. And they see it as a waste of time, that they'll never win, or that these are all corrupt, the competitions aren't straightforward. But that's not always true. I mean, we won the BIC competition. It was a fair and square. I mean, we would like to imagine that it was completely above board because we won. But nonetheless, enter competitions, because the benefits, one is that you may win and then you get something much larger than otherwise. But second is, it really exercises. It's like doing a marathon, that you're really sort of putting in a lot of effort to very quickly come to some resolution on something. And it's a nice exercise which you can then, if you don't win, those ideas can come into your work elsewhere. It's kind of a...
Bijoy, is it possible without, let's say, political clout, without, let's say, an internal hand of somebody high and mighty, or like they say in Hindi, kisi ke haath sar pe or something like that. Is it possible for, let's say, the same 31-year-old Abhishek to find and build public spaces? Or do you need them, and that is something that probably they'll need to start cultivating early on?
Networking is important. I mean, one must try to be seen, and at least in these days, this is important, that you build a kind of brand, as they say, that you are known for a certain kind of work, or you publish or whatever. But I don't see that political support or some influence is required. I think, like we had answered the answer to the previous question, if you are engaged with your community and if you find a way to get involved, there is a lot of money sloshing around. I mean, CSR money is a huge there is possibility that if you have a good idea, that your community is behind you, that you will find the money to do it. And so I would suggest that go out there and look at your neighborhoods and see if there are things that you think require the designer, that require an upgrade, which you can provide as an architect. And I mean, our cities require all the help they can get.
And with that approach, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
You got to keep finding those problems and try to take a shot at it.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. So honestly, that's the second aspect of building institutions is committee. And I've always liked this quote from Ogilvy that says, go around your city, sparks. Do you ever see statues of a committee? And I wonder, how do you deal with a committee? In fact, sometimes in my Toastmasters club, we joke saying, a committee sat down to make a Ferrari and they came up with a horse. How do you handle and navigate with committees? I'm sure there's not a Ravi in every project. So do you sort out as an intention to find somebody who can be that in-between person?
I don't have a very good answer to that. I mean, with the BIC and Sabha, it was only Ravi, and so I didn't really have to deal with. Luckily, at the BIC, Ravi took on the membership and was able to manage the building committee as well, and fought many of our battles for us, because he Of course, he had to be convinced first that what we were suggesting is the right way to go, and then he would make the case, and he's very, very persuasive. So luckily for us at the BIC, which otherwise would have been a complete fiasco, because we are not very good at that, and so I don't have a good answer to your question.
Do you sometimes feel a fear that B.V. Doshi sir went through with the Borges?
Oh, of course, yeah, of course. I think
Can you establish the context so it helps the...
B.V. Doshi's office won a competition to do the new diamond bores in Bombay. When it was commissioned, that was the single largest project ever commissioned in independent India. So it was a huge, building, the biggest fee, state-of-the-art building, great ambition. And in the final round, there's Charles Correa and B.V. Doshi fighting for this project, and Doshi wins the competition. So it was a dream project, and I remember when I was a student here, Doshi came with a lecture about that project to Bangalore, and it was just spectacular, fantastic large-scale models. It was an incredible project. But the challenge with the project is that the main, the client was actually a 12-member committee of members of the diamond merchant community. And so every meeting there was a chairman of that committee, but these 10, 12 people would show up for the meetings, and everybody had an opinion, and they wanted things a certain way. And for most of Doshi's career, he's dealt with individuals. He's worked on even the large public institutions. He's always had a point person, that he works with and then is able to convince and then gets. And again, like Ravi, Doshi is also very, very persuasive and has a skill in how to deal with people. I think with the Diamond Bows, the idea of a committee and to figure out how to navigate that was one of the challenges on that project. So yes, as an architect, I think if you're working with a larger group, communicating well and making sure you're able to also hear and listen to what is being said, to assimilate that and to get something meaningful out of it is one of the key skills, which I'm not very good at that, but it is something that is important. And some architects are very good at navigating large groups of people effectively.
How do you solve for it?
Well, with middling success. I'm not very successful. There are projects, we're doing a few schools. On some of the schools, even if it's an individual client, sometimes you're up against a wall. They are not willing to listen, or they don't understand. It's only after you build it that they realize what they've got. Sometimes it's a very tough sell. You're always trying to convince people. So every project brings with it its own set of googlies. You think you've kind of cracked it, and then there's this new client, a new site, a new challenge. And that's why I think architects live to be, very old, because their minds are constantly challenged by the circumstances that they're confronted with. So, yeah, I don't have an answer, unfortunately, Puneeth. I don't know what the magic recipe is. I would say some amount you have to let go of your ego, because, unfortunately, architecture schools drill into you the belief that you are the font of everything that is of value, that you have to come up with the sublime idea, that it's on your shoulders. The burden of creating the beautiful piece of architecture is on your shoulders. The moment you remove that from your equation and say that it isn't really my responsibility, that everybody has to come to play. The client has to come in without an ego, the contractor has to come in without an ego, that all of us are together trying to make something meaningful, then something beautiful can happen, because we will assimilate all of this information and be able to deliver. But that doesn't happen often. Often either we as architects come to the table with a lot of ego, believing that we will solve all the problems of the world, or the client thinks that way. We're not able to negotiate that. So I think the notion that you are in it together with others is an important thing to think of when you're doing architecture. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the Hundredhands as a name and as a metaphor comes in.
Yes.
It does take an absurdly big number.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you went to IISc, and it's a nice project, but it has got its, there are lots of things that could have been better. And again, we can take credit for the nice things, but we also have to say that, it wasn't a project where everybody was, together, and that there were lots of challenges in how we came together as a team. And the project shows that in its final form. Whereas something like Sabha, I always, yesterday in the car with one of the people from the office, I was just saying that, it's been such a joy on that project that, you just feel completely rewarded at the end of it, that you've come at it, the client, the contractors, everybody's come at it with this incredible positive energy that it's, at the end of it you feel, whatever it is at the end, that it feels completely satisfying. And that doesn't happen too often.
Yeah, architecture is a slow rewarding profession.
Like Mathura said, yes.
Yeah, as an architect, there must be so many regrets. You could have done this better. And I see that a lot of creatives and architects are very self-critical.
Yeah.
So it's never just the right thing. It's always a little more, a little less.
Yes.
It could have been, and I'm like, okay.
But that's the beauty of it.
Your projects.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of it, because it means that you can constantly be improving, and that's part of the fun. Yeah.
But I feel you can't enjoy your projects.
Right. Yeah. No, it's tough to go back to buildings because you always see the flaws. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very contrary to the assumption that, oh, you built this. So no. You're going to see that. You see that concrete chip there.
Yes. Yeah.
Concrete brings me back to something very interesting. I visited, I think, 4 to 5 projects that Bijoy did in my research. Bangalore International Center, Sabha, the Innovation Hub at ISC, IRA School. And I realized that you have this concrete finishes and Kota stone flooring and white side walls, and sometimes concrete finishing with planters coming in. And you'll not believe, when I first went to IIM Bangalore, I thought it was a construction site. I was like, somebody didn't complete this? What happened?
Yeah.
So, how to convince client that this is aesthetic? Because for somebody...
It doesn't look finished.
Yeah, it looks like, ganda lag raha hai. This looks dirty. Well, but I want to understand. But now after a few years, I've started to... by the way, there's construction happening around this place, so you will hear some construction noise. But the content is gold, so stay tuned. How do you appreciate the bareness of exposed concrete or exposed brickwork?
We've not really had too much trouble convincing people to do that. I've not really had to have that conversation. I think recently, Kota is, everybody likes Kota, and at the end of the day, many of these decisions are easy for institutional clients to make because this costs less to do it this way. So not to have to paint surfaces, not to have to use fancy materials. Kota is cheaper than most other stones. So I think a lot of these decisions are easy for them to make, not so much because of aesthetic, but because of budgets. So, and we are also happy to do it that way. So I think some of it is that early experience with the Hope projects, with the projects that we did in Tamil Nadu, the orphanage and things, that somehow our default go-to materials are the ones that are typically cheaper to use, and that they're locally available, and they require a lot of labor work, but the material itself is less expensive, and so I'm a bit saddened by you saying that it doesn't look great.
I'm a Marwadi. You see this wall right here?
Yeah,
so in the studio, he went and touched it.
Yeah.
I wanted this to be exposed concrete.
Oh.
And
right.
my dad is like, no. So we plastered it We put a wooden panel. We did all of this jim jam. 50,000 rupees we spent on this wall. Finally, to paste a laminate that looks like concrete. And I'm like, Dad, we could have just left it like this. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was such a hard sell, and I couldn't.
Concrete tends to be a bit more of a hard sell, but I think more and more. Yeah, but I think at the heart of it, these materials that we're using also we have to rethink. I mean, I think that time, concrete particularly, I think is a material that I have to rethink in terms of how we use it in the future, because it's a very, very, high embodied energy material. It requires a lot of heat and energy to produce, as a material, like steel, So concrete, if I'm doing RCC, it's got, of course, the cement, but it's also got steel. And so as an alternate, it's not. So one is trying to figure out other modes by which to build things. Concrete seems to be the thing that we're using a lot now, but I think we have to rethink that. There is an aesthetic of the concrete, but there's also this embodied energy problem, that the concrete has. So that, we don't have an answer to that yet. A lot of people are now using wood, kind of laminated, CLT, which is cross-laminated timber, which is thin strips of timber which have been glued together to get structural strength. And the timber comes from plantations, and so it's renewable. And it's a much more renewable sort of material, except for
Is timber wood?
It's wood, yeah. Some lightweight wood which has been laminated, means basically it's glued with other pieces of timber, so it becomes a size that then can carry a certain weight. It's expensive right now and it's not easily available, so that's probably an alternate to concrete. Steel is better than concrete, though steel has a higher embodied energy, but it's better because steel can be reused. You can, melt it and reuse it. Concrete is dead the moment you pour it and it sets. Some of the reinforcement can be reused, but it has a limited life. So I think the aesthetic is one. I think the question about the long-term applicability of some of these materials one has to think of. I don't have any magic solution.
It's a common thread that I see across your projects. And hopefully the next project I'll convince my Marwadi dad to listen, exposed concrete is a good look with Kota stone flooring.
We've done a new house in Nandi, which is a very nice, it's a big house, which looks onto the range, and that's also the same. It looks like any of the institutional projects, but it works very well and they're very happy.
Oh wow. In a place like Nandi, yes, it makes... Because of the views and the wind and the light is...
So, maybe some of the Marwadi clients can come there to see that house.
He's still selling. I love this. If you're an architect listening to this, you got to learn how to sell. You got to learn how to ask for projects. They won't come to you sitting in your office. Thank you for doing that. Okay. I remember speaking with a very elderly architect recently, and she opened up beautifully about the money side of architecture and how little it is, and how sometimes some of the most senior architects struggle to even eke out a small sum from their practice.
Right.
I wonder why. Is this something they have to make peace with? Saying, I'll have the freedom to have the creative ability to build things that have a legacy, but there won't be much money involved. Like it said, right? They don't drive in Ferraris, they don't vacation in Bora Bora. Is the equation same in building institutions in public places like it is across the space? Because I feel there's a huge brain drain, Bijoy, now when I see the architect industry. I see UX designers that were masters, that have gone out, done their masters in whatever architecture subdomain. They come back and they are doing UX design, product design, graphic design, but they're not practicing, or they're getting into interiors. And interior firms are getting into manufacturing because that's where they see the money and they don't see it in the practice. So if you could break down, where is the money in this practice and what is it that they can optimize for?
The fees are rather low, and the appreciation for what the architect does is
lower.
It's not, it doesn't, it's not commensurate with the amount of work that an architect does. So there are misconceptions about what the architect does. Like I had said in that, introduction to the film, everybody thinks that the architect basically just beautifies something that the engineer could do himself, or herself. That we're just doing elevations, or we're decorating, or this kind of. Not to take away from anybody who's doing that, but architects bring a lot more value to the table. So this idea of fees and about how much money you make, I think it's important even for a young architect to really be to value your own time, to value your effort, to value the amount of effort that you put into the work, and to go to a client confident of that value. That I think a lot of younger practices, they undersell what, and it is on you. I think the fact that you don't make enough money is something that you that is partially something that you can fix if you had you evaluate exactly what it takes to do the work that you do. I'm not saying that it's easy to convince a client, but I remember Doshi saying that one of the key skills of an architect is also the art of convincing someone to do something. That you have to have that ability to negotiate and to pitch what it is you do in convincing ways. It's something that takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of maturing as a practitioner, that you go into a room and you're able to make the case for what you do.
It comes it's harder still for somebody who doesn't really have a track record.
Yeah, but there are many young practices. I mean, I remember when I don't want to name any of the younger practices, but there are lots of young practices who've started with almost no background in the city, and yet through sheer force of will, and just making sure that they are confident of what they are doing, that you go into the room with that idea that this is something worthwhile and that I can provide real value for what I'm asking for. But it's still a bit difficult, because I think there's a lot of undercutting in the market. That though we all say that there's the council and there's some kind of prescribed fees, etc. We talk about it a lot in the film. But there are lots of architects who undercut, who take kickbacks, and this happens in every industry, that there are the bad apples. So typically fees are based on percentages. So if you spend X amount of money on building the house, then the architect, as long as he or she has been involved in everything, then they get a percentage of the fee, of the cost. So typically that ranges anywhere from say 5% to 15% or 20%. Some of the bigger, more famous architects are charging higher percentages. And so if you're fitting out a house with very, very expensive finishes, Italian marble or whatever else fancy furniture, then the fee gets exponentially, it gets higher. In institutional work, by and large, a lot of the institutional work is paid for on a per square foot basis, because there are very basic finishes. The costs of those buildings aren't very high. And so we get a flat per square foot rate, which does not come anywhere close to the percentage rates. You don't get that kind of feedback money. But what that means is that, because they are, the buildings have fewer components to them, or they are not as complicated as the houses, that it tends to work out in terms of fees. That institutions are safer, and sort of
they'll pay.
Yeah, they pay without delays and all that. Yeah,
they're good paymasters.
Yes.
When you say institutions, you're talking about private institutions, not
both
government
public.
Institutions.
Yeah, government institutions are different.
Okay.
That IISc has been a tricky project for us, because it takes time. It's bureaucratic, and it takes some time for bills to get through the system. Private institutions are very, very straightforward. We've also, this is something that young architects can also try, which is that we've now, for almost all of our projects, we are charging a monthly retainer. And how we come to that monthly retainer is that we say that the project is going to take us 24 months to do or 12 months to do, whatever the time frame that you think is reasonable, and then we calculate the fees based on the percentage that you're usually charging or the per square foot rate that and then if you were to take that money and stretch it out over the course of the construction of this building, it gives you a constant flow of money. It helps the client in terms of their flow, their cash
say
flow.
That again. So you charge a percentage and a retainer fee?
No. So you take, let's say that you're doing, 1 lakh is your fee and the duration of the project is 10 months, and you say that then that 1 lakh is spread over 10 months, and every month I get a lakh, that's my fee.
Every month you get 10,000?
Yeah, 10,000. Sorry,
okay.
10,000. That's right.
Yeah.
And so that, what that does is that it ensures that you have money every month to pay your salaries and to pay your rent, and it just gives your cash flow a certain stability. It actually helps a lot of our clients as well, who also then are able to plan for the next 24 months, that every month I have to, make sure that this money is, it's like an EMI in a way,
But this is not an additional retainer that you are...
No. It's just the fee just spread over the course of the project.
Okay.
And it's worked very well for us because it also, the time becomes very important. So clients want to decide quicker. They want to close out, decisions. We are under pressure to make sure that our drawings are done on time.
But what happens if it exceeds by a month or two?
Then there's a
again a retainer fee? Again?
Yeah, no. So then we have to mutually agree on some kind of, extension. Okay. So we did a house in Trichy where, it had gone over and we were getting a monthly retainer on that. And fortunately for us, that client agreed to continue the retainer for another 3-4 months that we were required to finish. But that's something that you have to negotiate with the client. I mean, not everybody may agree for the whole fee again or the same retainer again. But I think the time frame is good for everybody, that, the client, the contractor, everybody is now tied into this, and we are also, trying to finish it on time. So I think the retainer is a good idea if you can convince your client to do that, and it works out very well for a lot of our clients.
That's one. Any other aspect that's worked for you?
Yeah, I think the other thing is about the consultants. So we have typically on a project, we will have a structural engineer, we'll have MEP, which is mechanical, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, air conditioning, etc. So these services are all clubbed together into MEP, and the MEP services, structural engineers, these typically are clubbed with the architect's fee. Now that sometimes becomes a bit of a challenge for a lot of practices, because it means that you have to get the money from the client and then pay out to these people their fees. And if there's a delay in that process, then you get stuck in that engagement with your consultant.
Yeah, your money gets locked up.
And the money gets locked up. So I would suggest that maybe if you can, to try to divest this, to get the consultants paid directly by the client, with the understanding that the consultants are people that you recommend, that the client can't just bring any Tom, Dick and Harry because of cost, but that you're able to convince the client to use certain consultants because of the quality that they provide. Typically, consultants are much cheaper than architects. They charge much lower fees, but the client should appoint them ideally on their own, so that you're not stuck trying to figure out how to pay your consultants as your payments get delayed. What else? There are also lots of architects who are doing turnkey work, where they design and then they also build.
Why did you decide not to build? I'll come to that, but yeah, please complete this. I'll come to that.
Why did we decide? I mean, I find that there is a bit of a conflict of interest in that engagement when you do turnkey work, because then your client, actually there is no, maybe if there's a PMC, there is some checks and balances to the work. But if it's a smaller project and if it's just the client and you, then you have to be above board and make sure that there is integrity in how you're doing the turnkey work, so that the client isn't getting cheated in that process. When the contractor is separate from the architect, then the architect keeps an eye, for quality assurance, for adherence to, certain specifications that have been mentioned. So that should not be diluted when there is no checks and balances, when the architect and the contractor are one and the same entity. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people do turnkey. There's also much more money to be made in that way because there are higher risks as a contractor.
But
as
there
an
are higher
architect.
headaches as well.
And, yeah, because of the headaches. And architects don't get paid because we don't take on much risk, you know. So if we had contracting as well, there are lovely architects in Bombay like Arjun, etc., who are doing, Arjun Mallik, who's also doing construction along with their design, and he says it's turned out very well for them in terms of how in terms of.
I've always felt architects are envious of builders, and they hate owners. So there's always this dichotomy that I notice in my little circle of friends.
Right. Oh. Sure. I don't know what else for a young architectural practice. Always work with a contract. Never do projects without a contract. Try to sign a contract, get a retainer, get appointed in a way that your clients don't take you for granted. And like I said earlier, respect the value that you bring to a project. Make sure that you understand that clearly, so that you're not taken for a ride by your clients. And I would say that if you're starting to hire people for your practice, try to hire people who are smarter than you. Try to look for people who have abilities that are different from yours, so that you enrich your own practice through your negotiations with people at the office. That there is this worthwhile conversation that will only make the practice grow and your projects get better. Don't be concerned that that you have to bring all the value yourself to the work. That think of it as a team game with many people together. So hire good consultants, hire good colleagues at the office, and make sure your team is of people who you respect and that who can further your own growth and ideas.
Any ideas of how to hire initially? The initial 1 or 2, maybe the person doesn't have the money or are afraid that they'll not be able to make the payroll. Right. Initial 1 or 2 engineers or budding junior architects. Any idea of how to find them?
Here's the secret. You have to teach, I think. You have to find a way to teach at some institution.
Lovely.
So that you can find the young ones who are about to graduate and then you approach them to join you if there's someone who is really wonderful at the studio. So teaching that's the secret reason why a lot of us are teaching. No, that's not true. But
but teaching solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
It fixes your cash flow.
Yes.
At least,
yes.
even if you're doing part time, you have an undergraduate
That's
degree.
True.
It sort of takes care of your kharcha.
Yes.
And it also gives you access to a lot of new blood.
Yes.
And I think it puts a structure to your otherwise free week.
Yeah, you have to, wherever you've studied, you carry all of those lessons from your teachers, and I think in a way it's good to give that back. And like Puneeth is saying, I think there is money in teaching. At least there is more money than there was earlier. So it could be a worthwhile added income to a small practice that you've started,
And those 2 days, take your dad's car and go to the college, because that matters.
Right.
Anything else you want to add for a beginner practice or
and I think also if you are hiring people, make sure that you meet them face to face. I think we oftentimes have had, we've been very, very fortunate with people at the office, and I'd like to take some credit for that, because I interview everybody who comes to the office. And more than the skill that is shown in the portfolio or the rendering abilities or whatever they may have, I think attitude is the key thing that I look for when I meet someone in an interview.
Tell me more.
How they present themselves, how they talk about their work, the passion they show for architecture, their awareness of things, how they talk about these things that really interest them. Small things. How they handle like you talk about their thesis, how they've handled their thesis, what their concerns are. I mean, when you speak to people and you're engaging with them, you kind of get a sense of how are they easy to deal with? Do they have some preconceived notions? When you're trying to read these things when you're interviewing someone, you're trying to read what really interests them and drives them. I remember one interview specifically. There was this one girl, and it was a really dull interview. She just wasn't. I mean, it looked like she wasn't really that interested, and she'd just come because we had called for an interview, and she'd applied. So we were talking about stuff, this, that, and the other. And this just randomly, I asked her about, she had, at the end of her portfolio, she had a few photographs, she had taken some photos, random pictures. And so I just casually asked her about photography, and her eyes just lit up. Like, till then, she was talking about her projects as if, she was least bothered about them. But the moment it came to photography, and then we had this long chat about what it is about photography, about the real thing versus the thing that you're seeing in the lens versus the print, the value of representation in all of that. It was a fantastic conversation. So sometimes in an interview, you're also trying to tap that one thing that someone really... I mean, that's the point also in the office, when you have colleagues in the office.
Did you hire her though?
No, she went to another office. She joined somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but I think when you have people in the office, the other really important thing, which I am not very good at, but which I think is very important, is to find the thing that each person is really good at. Like what some people are very, very good theoretically, some people are very good at sight, some people make amazing models. We had an amazing intern a few years ago, a girl from Tanjavur, I think. She again was very, very quiet and shy. And then I just put her onto one of the models for one project. And you can't believe the quality of that model. It blew everybody. And she'd never spoken in the office. She was just quietly sitting in one corner. And then somehow this one thing just, this was the thing that was her gift, that she just had this ability to make amazing models. And she had a real joy, in doing that. So you have to find as a person running the office, as a young person, if you have a team, maybe 2-3 people, you have to know what each person is really good at, and I'm working on it with my own team at the office, but it's important for you to tap that one nerve that then they also flourish, and the studio also benefits from that special capability that each person has. Yeah.
I want to ask you about the office. You have a lovely office, and whenever you get the chance, please do drop in, and
Yes.
there'll be the warm Mary there. She'll walk you around and show you the space.
Yes.
Do budding architects or new studios, or what are they called these days? Couture? No, they're called something fancy French.
Boutique.
No, not even boutique. Something. Okay. Atelier.
Right, of course.
Yeah. Do they need a fancy office to start off?
When you're having a young family, let's say you have a little child and it's just the 3 of you, you have to have a small, but you have to have a nice place for that child to grow. And what does it mean to have a nice place? You have to have access to a small garden, if possible. You have to be close by to a park where the kid can go out to enjoy. But it can be modest, but it has to have a certain quality. So as an office as well, I mean, you don't have to have a very large office, but the office should represent what you hold as valuable. So what is it about that space that really you enjoy? And there are many friends of mine, not friends, but people who've left our office and then have started their own practices. And all of them have built these beautiful offices for themselves. Built as in some of them are renting space, but they've carved it out in their image, that this is how the environment that I like to be in. And it should represent, however modest it is, it should represent your tastes and sensibilities. So I think that's very important. It doesn't have to be a very large office, but it has to be you, and that you should use the office as a way to, maybe you do it slowly over time as you make some money, that you flesh it out and make it something that you enjoy. You enjoy to be there. We were recently in South Africa on a trip across South Africa, and while in Cape Town, we saw a whole bunch of these 1960s houses in Cape Town. Small, really tiny houses, just like, Joe Noera was saying, that 1500 square feet or less, square feet or less. But each house had this real domesticity about it, little places that, a little niche to keep your mug, or, a little artifact, or the light that comes in the evening has a way to get deep into the house. I mean, this small but exquisite. And so if you have a small office, make sure that it's exquisite, that it speaks about you. And we don't need much money to do that. I mean, you can do small things and yeah.
I could never think of office like yours in a place like that.
Right.
Like I've frequented that road for every Friday for the last decade.
Right.
And I couldn't, wait, where does this come from in this?
Yeah, that's also luck only, Puneeth. Yeah. We were very lucky to find that office. And we've been there since 2003, so 22 years now, So, and we have a great landlord, and I mean, it's just, we have the backyard. I mean, it's unusual. Yeah, we've always been there. Yeah, so if you're lucky, sometimes, things work out. Yeah. Anyway, we were very lucky with that one,
Coming to the final question, I think you have built amazing projects, places that in a way have for a while now defined what is it like to engage with a city like Bangalore and other places as well in different cities. What is the impact that you seek to make with your projects, with your work?
Well, at the heart of it, architecture is the making of places of well-being. That these are all of our projects. I mean, this is at the heart of the work. That they're just comfortable places to inhabit. They're places that give you joy, that connect you, hopefully, to metaphorical conditions that, that like in Nandi or like at Sikandra, that they move you out and bring you a heightened sense of self. So, I mean, I don't know if you've achieved that in any of the projects, but this is the search, that you come into a building and it lifts you. It gives you a way to really sort of, to be alive. In terms of the public engagement of the projects, I mean, we have been very fortunate to get the projects that we have. But like I said earlier, I mean, a lot of this, the architecture of these buildings is only a small part of what these projects actually mean. And the real credit for those buildings isn't so much because of the architecture, it's because of the stewardship. I mean, a word that you used. Without that, the city cannot thrive. I mean, the city needs stewards. Architects are one part of a large team of people, but really the patrons and these, the people who imagine, and sometimes architects can play that role too, which is what we were talking about earlier with, some of the firms here in Bangalore. That who is bringing this vision and who is then curating it and serving it up for the city. This is really important. And Bangalore has a great history. I mean, from RBNMS like Arcot Narayan Swami Mudaliar, right up to Ravichandar, to Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, to Nilesh, of course, to Mr. Premji. All of these people who've made, a wonderful career and have had great success in corporate life have given back to the city in substantial ways. And Bangalore is unusual like that compared to, a lot of the other cities in the country. So, the Science Gallery, Mr. Poddar's map, which is, an amazing institution built for the city. Brigade has recently put in money to revamp Venkatappa Art Gallery, and then, of course, Prestige has made that amazing auditorium. And so there are all of these projects which, have in the absence of actual public investment in public space, the private enterprise, the private individuals have enabled this, which is unusual, and which we need more of that. I mean, the city benefits greatly from these projects.
Yeah, these places thrive despite
the
quick rapid fire questions.
Sure.
I'm done.
The toughest part of the interview.
No, this is the fun part. What's a book you recommend? It could be fiction, non-fiction, architecture, non-architecture, doesn't matter. A book that you recommend the listeners to read.
Ways of Seeing is a good one, which is the John Berger book. What else? Simple. Maybe Invisible Cities, Italo Calvino, which is a great book. Descriptions of cities, but it's just it takes you on a fever dream. It's fantastic.
Because you're into movies, a recent piece of content, movie, series, documentary, YouTube video that you recommend?
Well, any lecture by Neil McLaughlin I think is worth revisiting. He's fantastic. On YouTube, architecture lectures by him. Movies, what is a good movie recently that I saw? Conclave was great. It's kind of a mass mainstream film, but that was fantastic. Perfect Days was great. The Wim Wenders film set in Japan. That really moved me. That was fantastic. The idea of everyday routine as a way to the sublime. This is amazing. Yeah, I started crying at the end. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it was great. That was a great film.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A challenge for my listeners. 1 week long challenge that you would give them. Let's assume they're architects, budding architects. What would be a 1 week challenge? And they will tag us and we'll just make a hashtag out of this.
Well, 1 week challenge would be to find a small design project in your neighborhood. So why don't you propose a small little thing
and
that
hashtag with it?
Yeah,
something like a better neighborhood or
hashtag neighborhood revolution. I don't know.
Oh, hashtag neighborhood revolution.
Yeah.
So next 7 days, find something around your own neighborhood that you can fix as an architect, or you can improve.
Yes.
Or you can delete.
Yeah, that's right. All of the above. Yes.
All of the above. Any of the above.
Any of the above. Yes. Yeah.
A place that in Bangalore, around Bangalore, that they have to visit and study and devour. In India, in Bangalore.
Well, two things I would say: go to the Bhoganandishwara temple in Nandi and spend time in the Kalyani. It's one at the base, at the bottom of the temple.
Okay.
There's a wonderful Kalyani there which has been shut for a long time. I think it's recently opened. They've been renovating it. It's one of the most incredible places in the city. The other place, if you haven't visited as an architect, is I Am Bangalore. You have to go. If you do want a guided tour, and if there are enough, if there are a number of you interested, then I'm happy to take you on a walk to I Am Bangalore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, any excuse I can get to go there. Yeah.
And in India, if you had to point out?
Well, Sikandra is wonderful. Visit Sikandra, visit Mandu. I don't know. I mean, some of these older places. In terms of new buildings, things to visit. Yeah, so you always trip up when you have to think. Well, I mean, I think a lot of the Korea projects are worth visiting, like that wonderful building in Bhopal, which recently friends had visited and said that it was in good shape and that it was worth visiting. His wonderful apartments in Bombay, if you can get access to Sonmarg and Kanchenjunga, those are amazing buildings. I don't know what else. Yeah, Mandu. That's it.
Lovely. And one final recommendation is the transcript that is from the film. Yeah. And I like the description of it. For the film, I met with 24 architects, 3 academicians and 5 students of architecture in the city over the course of 2 weeks. I collected around 15 hours of footage, traveled close to 500 kilometers and lost 5 kilos in the process. Do check it out. I think it's really worthwhile as a project that you've done.
Thank you.
On that note, go and make some Galata.